Our scripture reading is the first 15 verses of Exodus, and Mr. Mark did a great job of reading that earlier. But what I want to do is give a little background and read just a portion of that, and then we'll think about it together. At this point in the story, Moses has had a long journey already. Moses, as a young man, saw an Egyptian taskmaster abusing a Hebrew slave, and in anger, he killed him. And because of that, he had to flee Egypt for his life. And so this is years later, when he is settled in the land of Midian, and he is now a shepherd, and he's watching his father-in-law's flock in the desert. And that's where this passage picks up. And I'll read the first few verses of that. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, "I must turn aside and look at the great sight and see why the bush is not burned up." When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Come no closer. Remove the shoes from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." God speaks to us in the reading of Scripture. This morning, I want us to think about the question, when do you take your shoes off? When do you take your shoes off? Now, that sounds like a strange question to ask, and it sounds like a pretty straightforward sort of question and answer, but it's not so simple as it turns out. There are whole websites that deal with when it's appropriate to take your shoes off or to leave them on. There are whole forums that discuss whether or not you ought to wear your shoes in the house or leave them at the door, and whether you ought to require others to leave their shoes at the door as well. There's one blog, in fact, that I ran across in looking at this, and in that blog there are 37 reasons listed why you should not wear your shoes in the house and why you should allow no one else to wear their shoes in the house. 37. I'm not joking. 37 reasons. And they're along the lines of hygiene, for one thing. In great detail, the writer of the blog describes what can come into your house on the bottom of your shoe. And so she says, leave the shoes at the door and don't let anyone else bring that stuff in the house either. She also talks about what the shoes and the abrasives that you bring in on the bottom of your shoes will do to carpet and flooring, and how much harder it is to clean. And she says, besides, it's good hospitality to take your shoes off and to invite others, require others to take their shoes off as well. She said if someone is Asian, or if they are Eastern European or Scandinavian or Hawaiian, then they will be more comfortable without their shoes in the house, because that's their tradition to remove their shoes when they come in the house. So it's good hospitality, and besides, she writes, it's much more informal and more relaxed. And so it's a good practice for that reason. But one that I really like is, she said, when you come to the house and you take your shoes off and you leave them at the door, she said, what you're doing is you're leaving your cares at the door. You're leaving work problems at the door. The shoes become a kind of symbol. You leave that stuff at the door and you enter across the threshold into a different place. And the shoes kind of symbolize, when you leave them behind, that you've entered into this different place. I kind of like that. So when do you take your shoes off? When you go in your house, do you take your shoes off? Do you require other people to do that? Some people do. When do you take your shoes off? Well, of course, we all take our shoes off when we go through security in this country. We have for years, and it may be that we won't have to do it much longer, they say. That policy is gradually being phased out. But we take our shoes off because we have to in that situation. We also take our shoes off, we being whoever enters these particular holy sites. If you go into a place of worship, a mosque, a Buddhist temple, a Hindu temple, a Sikh temple, in all those places you remove your shoes. Why? Because this ancient tradition that we see in our scripture reading today is carried on in those places. That is, you take your shoes off when you enter holy ground. You take your shoes off when you enter a holy place, as a sign of respect and as a sign of showing that you are somehow grounded in that place. I know a couple of pastors who, when they preach or teach, remove their shoes because they understand that place, that moment, that time of teaching and preaching to be a holy place, a different place. And so they take their shoes off to remind themselves that they're in that place. One of those pastors is Martin Leathers, who is behind me singing with the choir this morning, our associate youth director. And it's to remind him that this is holy ground, this place of teaching and preaching. It's a powerful symbol, really, in many cultures, in many places, and certainly in antiquity in the reading we see today. When do you take your shoes off? Moses is standing on holy ground. Holy means, quite simply, different. It's ground at that point that is different from any other ground. We call Scripture the Holy Bible because we mean to say that it's different from any other book. Or we can call a sanctuary a holy place because it's set apart for a different purpose. It's different. God is holy because God is different from any other being. So the word means different. And when we come to that place where we're standing on different ground that's not like another, a moment in our life, a time in our life, then the appropriate response is to take off our shoes. Maybe not literally, but at least metaphorically, at least symbolically, to take off our shoes and to be grounded in that place, to really be planted in that place that is called holy. So, when do we take our shoes off? When is it appropriate to do that? Well, it's appropriate, it seems to me, when we come to that place in our lives where we're able to focus on God and what's important and the things of God and the direction of our lives without distraction. That's a good time to take your shoes off because you're on holy ground at that moment. Sometimes we get there by surprise. How often have I heard a couple say to me, you know, when our baby was born, we held him and we looked at him and we felt light-hearted because of the joy of the occasion, and we also felt heavy because of the responsibility. And we were so moved by the presence of God in that we changed directions, that we hadn't been paying much attention to God, and we hadn't really been relying on the strength that comes from God, and we haven't really been paying much attention to how we would find support for raising our child. And that's what brought us to church, they say. That's why we've come. Because that was holy ground. That was a moment when they took off their shoes and they were planted in that place, and it was a turning point for them. Sometimes it comes in times of difficulty, a time when you would not expect it to be so. Sometimes it's even an illness, a time when you're sidelined for a while. Now, of course, please understand me. I don't believe that God ever causes an illness or brings about something like that to make a point or to get our attention or anything like that. But in that time, it can be a moment for us that is a time to take off our shoes, a holy ground moment, a time when we're so focused without distractions on where we are, where we're headed, what's important in life, and where God is and all of that, that it is a different place. It's a holy place. When I was 32 years old, I had my first neck surgery, and I had been, sort of running headlong into the future and living life and busy and all of that. And for 6 weeks, I was just sort of sidelined. I didn't expect how profound that experience would be and how it would become a different place, a holy place, a place for thinking deeply and praying and being in touch with God and to think deeply about the direction of life and what's important and what my priorities were as a husband and father and a pastor and all the things going on in life. It was holy ground. It was a moment to take off the shoes. We do that intentionally when we go on a mission trip. We go to serve. We intentionally go to a place that's different from any other place. But it becomes different in another way when we are surprised by all the ways in which God is present, even in the difficult circumstances in which we are ministering. And we end up that we are the recipients of the ministry of others who live in that difficult place and who demonstrate their faith every day. Or a retreat. There are lots of ways in which we find ourselves in this intentional place of focus, and we take our shoes off and we're grounded, and it becomes holy ground. I wonder if one of the reasons Moses has to take his shoes off is so he won't run, is so he won't go back to the sheep and go back to the business. But he has to take his shoes off, and that means he stands there grounded in that place long enough to be in the presence of God and to think deeply and to receive his call. That's also a place, a time for taking off our shoes when we receive a call from God. Everybody is called. Everybody is called to serve. But in what particular way, in what particular place, and with whom? It varies from person to person, of course. What are your gifts and graces? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? Parker Palmer talks about listening to your life, listening deeply to your life, to who you really are and what you really care about and what's really important and what you're passionate about. And you also listen to the world and you discern what are the world's needs, what are the community's needs, what are the needs beyond myself. And Frederick Buechner has a beautiful way of bringing it together because he says that our calling, our vocation, is found at the intersection of our deep gladness, to use his words, and the world's deep need. Our deep gladness, our joy, our passion, our abilities, and the world's needs intersect. And where they intersect is a place to remove our shoes. It's holy ground. It's a place we receive our call. And that was sure true of Moses. It was standing on that holy ground, planted there, grounded there, that he received his call. And very quickly, he began to argue with God. That's holy ground too. That place where we argue with God, where we wrestle with God, that's a place to take off our shoes, to be grounded, and to stay a while in that place. And if we are arguing or wrestling with God, we are not alone in that. People of faith have done that from the beginning and will do that. And Moses does that. He argues with God. He makes excuses why he can't possibly answer that call. He wrestles with God. Are you really there? Is this is this authentic, this experience I'm having? I mean, is this really you? What's your name? What do I say to these people that I am going to? I'm not capable of this. This is too big for me. I mean, he just argues and wrestles with God, and that is holy ground. It's a place that's different from other places. And you may be arguing with God right now. If you're not, you will be, and you probably have in the past. It's just what we do. It's part of relationship. But when we come to that place as a wrestling and arguing with God, we come to that place where we need to stay there a while. We need to take off our shoes. It's holy. It's different. And one thing we see from Moses is that the holy really is found in the ordinary. I mean, he's going about his business, just doing his ordinary thing as a shepherd when he has this experience. But he's paying attention. His eyes are open. He's open to it. And so I wonder, as we live our lives day to day, are we looking around to find reflections of God's grace in the lives of others? Are we looking around to find how God might be at work in the world and how we might be a part of that? Are we looking around to see the beauty of creation, to really see it, and to appreciate, along with the psalmists and poets and hymn writers through the ages who have said all of creation sings God's praise? You know those moments I'm talking about? Moments when we just need to take off our shoes and to be grounded and to stay in that place and to appreciate that this is different. It's holy. And that kind of holiness is found all around us if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. I want to share with you the lyrics of a song that I love. It's my favorite song that Peter Mayer wrote and sings. He's been here a number of times at our church. And he speaks of the holy in the mundane, the holy in the lives we experience each day. Listen to his words. When I was a boy, each week on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today, the only difference is everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two. Jesus made the water wine, and I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track because everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small. But an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, because everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face and say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come and say it's not a sacrament. I tell you, it can't be done. This morning outside I stood and saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, because everything is holy now. May we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear that we so often stand on holy ground. May we remove our shoes, be grounded in God's presence. And then finally, and communion really is a celebration of this. When we come to the Lord's table, we come to a table that's different from any other table. It's holy. It's a table where everyone is welcome to come, and it's a place where we experience, through the taking of these symbols of the body and blood of Christ, we experience again His presence with us at the table and the grace of God that makes possible new starts and new beginnings. Moses, at the age of 80 in this text, has a new start, a new beginning. The past is put into the past. There is this new adventure and new life ahead for him. We come to the table and we celebrate that God is our God of new beginnings. And that in all that He has done for us in Jesus Christ, we see grace upon grace upon grace to enable us to live a life that is different, holy, new. In his book, Messengers of God, Elie Wiesel, who spent several years as a child in concentration camps, the only survivor of his family, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986 for his work and for his writings, believed after he had survived that he would put it in the past, in other words, never speak of it again, try to not think of the horrors again, but he couldn't do that. He ended up writing a book entitled Night, and that book was followed by 40 more books. And he wrote this in one of his books, Messengers of God. Listen to his words. According to Jewish tradition, creation did not end with humanity, it began with humanity. When God created us, God gave us a secret, and that secret was not how to begin, but how to begin again. It's not given to us to begin. That privilege is God's alone, but it is given to us to begin again, and so we do. Every time we choose to defy death and side with the living. It is given to us the gift, the secret, to begin again. And so we can, and so we do. And it's that point at beginning again that we take off our shoes and we're grounded in the presence of God, and we can see that there is a new future God has for us. Amen.